That was the voice of our castaway this week, the fine dramatic soprano Dame Eva Turner, who celebrated her 90th birthday this week. Dame Eva, this is a bad time to dump you on a desert island, taking you away from all the parties and celebrations.
Oh, that will give me a little rest.
How well could you endure loneliness?
I've never had a tremendous amount of time to call my own, so perhaps I would welcome a little time in which I could reminisce and so on.
Did you find it very difficult to choose just 8 records to
Oh,
take
I
with you?
found that exceedingly difficult, enormously difficult. Oh, so many I want to play.
How did you set about it? Did you make long, long lists?
I did, and then I deleted those, and then I did it again and again. Oh, dear.
Well, here you are. You've got your list. What's the first one?
The first one would be An die Musik of Schubert. And you know why I chose that? First and foremost, I want to pay homage and my tribute to music, which has been my life.
Yes.
And this lied, really, the words are so beautiful. Du holde Kunst. I love it.
Who sings it?
Lotte Lehmann, whom I knew.
Yes.
She was at the Royal Opera House when I first came in 1928, in the international season.
An die Musik, sung by Lotte Lehmann. Now, you're a Lancashire lass, and your father was in the cotton industry.
Yes.
A musical family, yours?
Yes, they were, in a very amateur way, of course. We always enjoyed going back from church on Sunday nights, family gatherings, singing the hymns again.
Round the piano?
Round the piano.
Were you a big family?
No, there was just my brother and myself, but we always went to the grandparents, and the aunts and uncles came too.
Yes.
Of course, that was before we moved to Bristol, and we moved to Bristol when I was 10 years of age.
When did you start to learn music? Were you put to the piano as a child?
Yes, I studied piano. I used to get up about 5 or 6 in the morning and practice with the soft pedal, and I've been very grateful through the years that I did that when I had to study scores very quickly and so on.
When did you start to sing?
Oh, I began to sing when I was about 10 or 11. When I was 13, I sang in church.
Solo?
Yes. We were in Bristol, and I was studying with a teacher in one of the suburbs, and then I went to study with the teacher who taught Dame Clara Butt.
Who was that?
Daniel Rutem.
What was the first opera you heard?
The first opera was Il Trovatore, and strangely enough, that was with the Royal Carl Rosa Opera Company, and I joined that very company later.
Yes, you
and
did.
when my father took me, and I knew from that moment on I wanted to sing in opera.
Well, having made that decision, that seems a good point in your story to break for the next record. What shall that be?
Well, the next recording is, you know, I should tell you why I've chosen this.
Of course.
It is the Refice, sung by Claudio Muzio. Ombre di Nube. And I heard Muzio when I went to the Scala in 1924, a most gorgeous singer, a soprano I loved. And I think she sings this very movingly. She makes the words pregnant with meaning. Oh, and she really, it's most touching for me.
Umbra di Nube by Refice, sung by Claudio Muzio.
Did you realize her diction, how perfectly excellent it was?
It is a lovely piece of singing. You went to London after your Bristol studies to study at the Royal Academy of Music.
Yes.
How long were you there?
I was there from 1912 to 1915, and then I auditioned for the Royal Carl Rosa Opera Company, and he offered me 1 year in chorus. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, I could have joined the chorus perhaps before going to the Royal Academy of Music. But anyhow, I'm happy to say that I accepted, and I learnt very much in that year. And then I became a principal soprano doing small parts.
What was the first small part you played? Do you remember?
We opened in Swindon in 1915, and I sang The First Lady in the Magic Flute, for which I got this sum of 5 shillings.
That was extra.
That was extra to my chorus money. The chorus money was 35 shillings,
yes,
out of which we paid our rooms and board and so on.
And you were doing half a dozen different operas every week, weren't you?
Oh, yes, repertoire. But it was a wonderful experience.
Of course. And then quite quickly, they began to give you leading roles.
Poco a poco, yes. Poco a poco.
You were in the provinces most of the time. Did you have London seasons as well with the company?
I remember in 1917, I think it was, we came to the Garrick Theatre. And I remember I sang Maritana, and Ben Davis was the tenor.
Yes. Then
we went over to Shaftesbury Avenue, to the Shaftesbury Theatre, and again we were singing the Maritana, and Adelina Pate was in a box there for that afternoon performance. She left early to return to Swansea. You know, she lived at Craigenose Castle outside Swansea, so I didn't have the pleasure and the honour of meeting her.
But it was really something to have sung to Patti.
Yes.
How long were you with the Carl Rosa?
With the Carl Rosa until 1924. I became the prima donna.
Yes.
You know, we came to London to do a season in 1920 at the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden, in English.
Yes, everything
was in English, yes. And that was quite a success. And then, of course, we resumed touring.
Our touring round, doing all these different operas every week, things must have gone wrong quite often. Tell me your favourite story about the Carl Rosa.
Well, there were various happenings. I remember after that very season at the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden, I think the first theatre we went to after that was the Alexandra Theatre Hull, which of course was very much smaller.
Very much.
And I was singing Tosca. And always, after the second act, I went out to see what the drop was, you know, when Tosca threw herself over the castle walls.
Yes.
And at the Alexandra Theatre, someone came to speak to me, and I didn't go and look at the drop. Well, the drop at the Royal Opera House was much deeper, and this was very shallow. and I threw myself with much force and came up again.
Oh, that's lovely. The bouncing prima donna.
Yes. Oh, dear.
Right, now, what's your next record going to be?
My next record is O Don Fatale by Avis Tignani. Now, she was a singer with whom I sang so many Aidas, and actually she was the Amneris in the very last performance of Aida in 1939 in the international season before the Second World War broke out. I should tell you the tenor was Gigli, and the ammaestro was Armando Borgioli, and I was the Aida.
Oh, Don Fatale, of course.
It's from Don
Carlos
Carlos of Verdi, and she was superb. I heard Avi first of all at the Scala when I was living in Milan.
Avis Tignani singing O Don Fatale from Verdi's Don Carlos. Now, you toured with the Carl Rosa Company for, I believe, 9 years, playing principal roles in
Yes.
virtually the whole repertoire.
Yes.
Then something very exciting happened.
Yes.
Now, this was your introduction to Toscanini. How did that happen? Who proposed you to Toscanini? Was it an agent, or did one of his scouts hear you?
No. It really was that the international season was in progress at the Royal Opera House, and we, the Royal Carl Rosa Opera Company, were performing at the New Scala Theatre in Charlotte Street. And I was doing 3 performances of Butterfly one week and 3 performances of Fidelio the next week. And Maestro Panizza heard of this and asked me, he was the conductor for the international season at the Royal Opera House, and he asked me if I would come and audition at Covent Garden, which I did. And after the audition, he said, could I leave at once to audition for Toscanini? And I left at the end of the week and auditioned for Toscanini, and he gave me a contract.
For how long? For the season?
For the season.
So off you went to Milan, where you decided to master Italian in a few weeks. You really worked, didn't you?
Oh, yes. It meant much application, but I was thrilled to do it.
What was the first role that the maestro cast you in?
Friar in the Rheingold.
What was Toscanini like to work for? Was he frightening?
Well, as a matter of fact, I did not sing with Toscanini conducting. He attended the rehearsals, but I sang mostly with Maestro Gui and Maestro Panizza.
When did you first sing Puccini's Turandot?
In 1926, if my memory serves me correctly, at the Teatro Grande in Brescia.
In those days, I believe they used to break the performance.
Yes, wherever I sang it for the first time, they did as Toscanini did on the first night. And that was that when they came to the end of Liu's death in the last act, Maestro Toscanini put down the baton, turned to the audience and said, "A questo punto moriva il maestro." At this point died the maestro, and that was a 2-minute silence always. Very, very moving. And Turandot is on the stage with her face covered with a veil. And I was always very grateful for that, because I always found it very, very moving.
Yes. Let's have your fourth record.
The fourth record is Sir Henry Wood. I would like to play a little of the Serenade to Music, because, you know, I did many, many promenade concerts with Sir Henry. I did some of the Wagner and Beethoven nights, and Sir Henry was perfectly wonderful. And they gave him a marvellous gala performance in 1938. I think it was in October. And I remember seeing him many months before, and he said, you know, Eva, they're talking about giving me a concert, and I do want the singers who've been associated with me to take part. But of course the concert would never end if they all sang an aria. So he said, would you mind if you sing but a few notes? Well, towards that end, to have the singers that he had been most associated with, Vaughan Williams composed the Serenade to Music. And there were 16 singers, 4 sopranos, 4 tenors, 4 mezzos and contraltos, and 4 basses and baritones. And I'm sorry to say all the tenors have passed on, and also 3 of the contraltos and mezzos. Mary Jarrett is still with us. I could tell you the names, if I may, very quickly. Astrid Desmond, Margaret Balfour, they have passed on, and Frank Titterton, Paddy Jones, Heddle Nash, and Walter Widdop, they're not with us anymore.
Yes, all the 4 tenors.
And then 2 of the bassists died, Norman Allen and Harold Williams, the Australian, and recently Elsie Sotheby of the sopranos. But Lillian Stiles Allen and Isabel Bailey and our Eva are still here.
I believe the piece we're going to hear from Vaughan Williams' Serenade to Music is the final passage, which is choral, with all 16 of you singing together, and just about 2 bars solo sung by Isabel Bailey.
Yes, which she did beautifully.
The closing passage of Serenade to Music by Vaughan Williams, a tribute by 16 of his favourite singers, including you, Dame Eva, to Sir Henry Wood. Now, you were an international star, Dame Eva, but you still hadn't sung in the international season at Covent Garden.
Well, I came back in 1928 to sing Turandot at Covent Garden in the international season.
Yes.
And also Cavalleria and Aida.
Aida was another of your especially great roles,
I sang
wasn't
it very much.
And you had a long contract in Chicago.
Yes, I went from the season after Covent Garden in 1928. I went to Chicago for 3 years.
You also worked with Mascagni.
Oh, yes, yes.
What was that in?
Well, I sang Isabeau. As a matter of fact, in 1929, I sang the Isabeau at the Arena Verona. And then later, about 1933, it would be, I think, that I sang it at the Teatro Reale of Rome with Mascagni conducting.
Tell me about Mascagni. What sort of man was he?
Oh, very, very amusing, very talkative, a fine man.
And Beecham, of course. You worked a lot with Beecham.
Oh, a tremendous amount. a tremendous amount. As a matter of fact, I had the honour of being the first soloist when he formed the London Philharmonic Orchestra, and we did the tour of Great Britain and Ireland.
There are so many wonderful stories about Sir Thomas Beecham. Have you got one?
Well, I remember one that happened at the Royal Opera House when I was singing Brunhilde. And in 1935, we were doing Siegfried. And Walter Widdup was the tenor, I remember. And Sir Thomas wanted to do it in English. And, you know, when Siegfried comes along the top, he sees Brunhild lying there, and he says, "Das ist kein Mann." Of course, we were doing it in English, and that is no man. And someone from the gallery called out, "You're telling us." I remember that very well. I always found Sir Thomas marvellous, wonderful. He was wonderful to me. I loved singing with him.
Let's have record number 5.
Well, I thought it would be nice to play a recording conducted by Sir Thomas Beecham, which is the Scala di Seta of Rossini. In the 1930s, I think it was. Oh, I loved it. I loved it and played it. And I'd like to hear it again.
The Rossini Overture, The Silken Ladder, Sir Thomas Beecham conducting the London Philharmonic Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, there was virtually no opera in London during the war.
Oh, no.
How long was it after the war before things got going again in the operatic field? When did Covent Garden open again?
I think it was in 1946. I remember I was at lunch one day, and Sir David was at a table near us.
Sir David Webster.
Sir David Webster, and he came over and asked if he may telephone me, and it was to ask me if I would come to sing the Turandot for him at the Royal Opera House, which I did, and we did it then in English.
Yes, that was the policy for several years, wasn't it?
Well, for a little while, yes.
When did you decide to leave the operatic stage?
Well, I sang the Turandots in 1947, 48, I think, and then in 1949 I was invited to go to the University of Oklahoma as a visiting professor of voice for 9 months.
Yes.
I thought I would like to go back to America, so I accepted. But you know that I was there 10 years. I never really retired. It just went on like that.
There's an amusing story of the press announcement that announced your appointment.
Oh, yes. I must tell you, I was announced as a visiting professor of voice with the O left out of voice. I was a success at once, of course.
So 10 years at Oklahoma.
Yes.
And then Professor of Voice at the Royal Academy, or
Yeah,
school.
I came back to teach at the Royal Academy of Music.
And you're still teaching young singers?
Yes, and judging too.
Now, you have a breathing exercise which you always use with your pupils.
Oh, yes. As they're walking, they can always be helping their breathing. And I tell them to take 12 steps, taking the breath in, 12 steps holding it and 12 steps letting the breath out. Now the last is exceedingly difficult to regulate.
Yes.
Very difficult.
I'll start practicing tomorrow.
Yes, that's right.
We've got to your 6th record.
Well, my 6th record would be Placido Domingo. I would like him to sing Nessun Dorma. I only wish I were singing today, to sing Turandot with him.
Placido Domingo singing Nessun Dorma from Turandot.
Lovely, lovely.
Now, Dame Eva, the incredible belief that you were indeed 90 on March the 10th, on Wednesday. An incredibly young 90. You don't look it or sound it, and I'm sure you don't feel it.
Well, it's good to hear that.
And there's a splendid celebration at the Royal Opera House.
Yes, wonderful, isn't it? I'm enormously touched. All the people so kind.
And another celebration at the Colosseum by the English National.
Yes, marvellous.
What a pity that the old Carl Rosa doesn't exist to give you a party as well.
Yes, but I am to have the pleasure of unveiling a tablet to Mr. and Mrs. Phillips of the Carl Rosa in St. Paul's, Covent Garden.
Oh, splendid.
Later on.
I'm delighted to hear that,
Yes.
because they did sterling work.
They did a lot of pioneer work.
Indeed they did.
Yes.
Well, record number 7.
Well, I went the year before, for the opening of the Metropolitan Opera. They invite me every year. And I had the great pleasure of being invited by a friend of mine who was the past president of the New York Philharmonic Orchestra to be his guest for the birthday of Isaac Stern. And Perlman and Zuckerman were also playing. It was a most fabulous concert.
I should think so.
I enjoyed it beyond words. You know, I'm so happy that in this time I can attend concerts more and more and the opera more and more. I think I'm very fortunate. Well, this was a concert to remember for all time.
Some really wonderful violin playing there must have been with those three.
And Zuckerman played the viola, and the tone was quite out of this world. We were all transported. It was gorgeous. And I would love to play just a few bars of that.
Yes.
It would be lovely.
An excerpt from the second movement of the Mozart Sinfonia Concertante for violin and viola, with Isaac Stern and Pinchas Zuckerman and the New York Philharmonic Orchestra, recorded at that Isaac Stern anniversary celebration that you attended in New York. Dame Eva, what are your hobbies apart from music?
Well, I used to swim a lot, but I don't swim so much these days.
You like cooking, I know that.
Yes, I do. And of course, I like the concerts and the opera and so on.
How are you going to manage on this desert island? Can you look after yourself reasonably well, do you think? The climate is good and...
Yes, I think I would try to forage about and see what I could do to make life livable.
Yes.
See what I could find round about.
We'll arrange with a previous castaway to leave you a comfortable hut.
Yes.
To give you a start.
Yes.
What's your last record?
My last recording would be from the Verdi Requiem, the Dies Irae. I'm always so thrilled when I hear that with the trumpets. And inspired, enormously inspired. I sang that work quite a lot, and I always felt it enormously. I love it.
Part of the Dies Irae from the Verdi Requiem, Tullio Serafin conducting the chorus and orchestra of the Rome Opera House. If you could take only one disc of the 8 you've played us, which would it be? That's the hardest question of the lot, I know.
Oh, it's fiendishly difficult for me, because I love them all. But I love the Refice with Muzio. I think it would have to be that.
That song by Claudio Muzio. And one luxury to have with you on the island, just one possession that would give you great pleasure, of no practical use.
Well, as a matter of fact, I've always wanted to be able to use castanets. So I think I'd like a pair of castanets. And if I could really use them well, I think I would perhaps come back and sing Carmen when I'm reincarnated.
Oh, we'll look forward to that. And one book, apart from the Bible and Shakespeare.
Well, when I lived in Milan, I began the Inferno of Dante. Mm-hmm. And I never really finished it. I'd like to have that book.
And you will have it in Italian, of course.
In Italiano, sì.
Yes, right. And thank you, Dame Eva Turner, for letting us hear your desert island disc.
I thank you. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.